What's going on YouTube? So while sedan sales continue to decrease, the Accord is not suffering all that much, and in fact is expanding its market share to fill the void left by rivals vacating the segment. That's why we've taken the day to check out the latest 2020 version of this popular sedan today at Gates Honda in Richmond, Kentucky. Of course, if you're in the market for any new Honda, make sure you stop by their dealership or visit them virtually via their website, which we provided a link to in the video description. So with that all said, let's see if the Accord is the midsize sedan to buy. So starting things off with the exterior design, Honda hasn't messed with it for 2020. Of course, since it was just redesigned a couple years ago, it does have all the latest Honda design elements, like the large black grille and chrome accent that goes across it. Now here on the Sport trim, that chrome is smoked, which looks particularly good contrasting this Sport exclusive paint called Still Night Pearl. Turning over to the headlights, Honda continues to nicely include this premium headlight arrangement as standard equipment. The low beams, turn signal, and daytime running lights are all LED, but if you want to add high beams to that list, you'll have to choose the Touring. And finally, all but the LX will have LED fog lights. As far as all the rest of the styling, the Accord continues to have one of the sleeker designs in the segment with near sportback proportions. And then around back, the athletic appearance continues, especially on the Sport, where you have the added rear spoiler and dual horizontal exhaust outlets. All trims have these partially LED taillights, which Mason and I like to call crocodile heads. But all in all, the Accord still has a striking design that turns heads, especially this affordably priced Sport trim. Now definitely one of the biggest pros of this Sport model is that it has these large 19-inch alloys, despite being just the second trim up the ladder. The only other model with 19s is the fully loaded Touring model, while the other three trims will come with 17 inches. Heading up to our mirrors, they are pretty bare-boned on this model, but EX and up will add heating and blind spot monitoring. But with the exception of BSM, every single Accord will come with all the other active safety features, including forward emergency braking, lane keeping assist, adaptive cruise control, traffic sign recognition, and auto high beam headlights. It's definitely still common practice for many of the rivals to charge extra for those features. Anyways, that's going to do it for the outside. So now let's check out the cabin before we take it out on the road. So in our past reviews, there's been a little bit of confusion about the intelligent entry system on the Accord. All the models will come with this key fob, however that does not mean you have intelligent entry. You will have to go for the EX and above, and that also includes the 2-liter Sport, but on this 1.5-liter Sport, you just have the key fob, so you will have to continue to press this button to unlock, and remote start is not included. So checking out the cabin here on the 2020 Accord, as you can see it is pretty much the same as the previous model years, so it continues to have a very nice looking design. Now as far as all the available material and color scheme options, what you'll be looking at is cloth seating on your EX and your LX, and then when you go for the Sport you have this combination, which is cloth in the middle and leatherette on the outside edges. And then when you go for the EXL or Touring, that comes with full leather. And then as far as the color options, all the trims besides for the Sport have the option of black, gray, or ivory. These Sport trims only have black. Now turning over here to your door trim, it is very nicely appointed, especially for a more basic model. So we do have a nice leatherette material across the armrest portion with color contrast stitching, as well as above it. All this is soft touch, and you do have a nice looking faux carbon fiber trim with the Sport. Some of the other trims come with a faux wood trim. As far as our front two windows, they are one-touch automatic, and the EXL and Touring would also have 3-person memory seating. Now coming down to these seats, Honda has nicely included this 12-way power adjusting seat, standard on all but the very base model. As you can see, it does have 4-way lumbar support, so that's definitely better than most of the competition. And then, like I was already saying, this seat is basically a combination of both cloth and the leatherette material, so it definitely looks very nice and it's very comfortable. Now, as far as the cabin materials, since this generation debut, they have been very nice, and that does continue here in 2020. So across your entire upper dash here, this is all going to be a nicely grained soft touch plastic. Dropping down to the middle, we have this faux carbon fiber trim. Like I said, it can be different other types of trims depending on the model. And then dropping down below that, we do have some hard touch plastics, but in typical Honda fashion, everything fits together excellently and it feels really, really solid. Now, standard across every single trim, we do have push button start. Now, taking a look here at the gauges, you've probably seen this set up before in previous Accords. It is the same as in the last two model years, but it's still a very cool setup because this side is analog on your right here, but the left side is actually an LCD, so this is reconfigurable. So this is really a cool setup, and it's nicely included on every single trim. Additionally, the Touring would also throw in a head-up display. Now, coming back to the steering wheel, of course it is electric power assisted, and it is nicely leather wrapped on all but the EX and the LX. You would also have rain sensing wipers if you went for the Touring. However, on all models, the steering wheel will be manually tilt and telescoping. And here in the US, heating is not available, but I believe our Canadian viewers have informed me that it is included on several of the trims in Canada. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and talk about storage. This is always a very strong area for Honda, and the Accord is no exception. So when we open up the center console here, you'll see a nice little sliding tray. You can remove that. And then underneath here we have a very large center console, especially for a midsize sedan. Also inside we have a 12-volt outlet. Up in front of that we have our two cup holders, and then you can just press down right here and this will open up a large storage area, great for sticking a phone right there. You also have a charging USB port and another 12-volt outlet. You would also have a wireless phone charging pad if you went for the Touring trim. Alright, now coming back to the shifter, this is one of the areas that does change between the trim levels. So we have the traditional shifter. However, if you go for the 2-liter model or the hybrid model, you'll have Honda's push-button style shifter. Of course, with this one, you're just going to pull back for drive. We also have our 2 drive modes, so if you click into the Sport mode, this will allow you to shift through some simulated gears here on the Sport as well as the Touring 1.5s. And then all the mods with the 2-liter engine and the 10-speed automatic, of course, will have paddle shifters. Heading into reverse, we do have a standard backup camera, which nicely includes active trajectory and 3 different angles as standard equipment, which is pretty rare for this class. Now, there is no 360-degree camera system available even on the top-end Touring. And then back behind that, we do have an electronic parking brake as well as a brake hold feature. Alright, now heading on up here, we have one of the other nice features, and that is a dual zone automatic climate control setup that's actually standard even on the very base LX. I like the way Honda has done this. I've commented in the past as well, just the refinement of the buttons. They feel kind of like an Audi, and you can see around the edges here, when you go down, it turns blue for cooler and red for warmer. Definitely a nice touch for an affordable vehicle. Now, we don't have any seating climate controls. That's because the EX and up will get the 3-stage heating, and the Touring only will have the 3-stage ventilation. Alright, so now that brings us up here to our audio system. Most of the models are going to come with the 8-speaker basic sound system like this one has, so let's go ahead and take a sample. Overall, sound quality is definitely competitive with other midsize sedans on the basic end of the spectrum. Alright, so now we are up here at our HondaLink system. Now this does remain the same for 2020, so I'll just click through a few of the important features here. As you can see, this is the newest version of HondaLink. We have the 8-inch display. That's what the vast majority of models will come with, but if you go for the LX, it will be reduced to 7 inches. Now, this particular model does not have integrated navigation. That's because you'll have to get at least the EXL or the Touring for that feature. And then as far as Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, they come standard on almost every model, but if you have the LX with the smaller display, it will not be included. Alright, so that pretty much does it for the main features I want to point out, so I'll go ahead and refer you to our dedicated tech help video. A link to that video is provided in the description if you want to learn more about this. Now, jumping on up here to our mirror, we just have the regular manually dimming one, but you will get an auto dimming one if you go for the EXL or the Touring. And then we will also notice here on our 1.5 Sport, we do not have a moonroof. You're going to have to go for the EX and up, or the 2-liter Sport will also include it. So there's a few items where the 2-liter Sport actually has a little bit more equipment than the 1.5-liter Sport, whereas the other 2-liter models have the same equipment as their 1.5-liter counterparts do. But overall, for 2020, I'll say the same thing as I said all the other previous model years. Even here on this reasonably priced Accord Sport, the cabin in here is absolutely phenomenal. It definitely hits all the highlights and does not feel basic in any way. Alright, so that concludes the front areas. Now I'll hand it off to my brother Mason to check out the back. So turning over here and looking at the Accord Sports rear door trim, it is a very nice one, even though the materials do not follow through from the front. So we do have a leather padded armrest right here, as well as a leather area above that. However, I do want to point out that this top portion is hard touch, and this trim is just black plastic back here where it's a faux carbon fiber in the front. Now down below that, we do have some bottles or some storage. And turning over to the seat is that two-tone design and very comfortable. And here in the middle of the Accord Sport, it is pretty barren in terms of features. You do have this really large storage area, which, you could actually fit quite a bit of stuff in. However, on the EX trims and higher, you are going to find the rear air vents back here. I do also want to point out that the Touring has standard heated rear seats as well. Now here in the center area, we do have a long fold-down armrest, and we also have assist grips as well as some lighting. Now, in terms of space in the Accord, this is actually one of this car's strong suits. So behind Drew's seating position, I have
I would say at least a foot, if not a foot and a half of space between my knees and the seat back, and my feet can easily slide up underneath the seat to almost make me fully stretch out. The technical measurement is 40.4 inches of rear legroom and 37 inches of rear headroom, which does place it far above most of the competition, including the Camry and the all-new Altima. Now coming around to the trunk on this 1.5 liter Sport, you do have to use the fob to open it, so just push the button. And when you do, you're going to find 16.7 cubic feet of space, which once again is a huge amount of space for this class of vehicle. I believe this is actually the largest measurement in the entire class. Definitely best that of the Camry and all-new Altima. And as far as how they finish it back here, it is finished good. So we do have some carpeting, as you would expect. And if I can get up underneath the floor here, we do have your kit here with your spare tire. And the seats do fold 60-40 split, as you would expect. Turning over to the passenger seat, it is manually adjusting on this model. However, it is 4-way power on the EXL and Touring. Now in front of the passenger, we do have a really good sized glove box. As you can see, it's quite deep. Also goes back a good distance. However, it is not felt lined and it is not illuminated. Now up top, we do have a sun visor with a light and mirror. It does also detach and extend. Well guys, that sums up all the rear areas of this Accord. So now let's go ahead and take it out on the road and see how this 1.5 liter turbo performs compared to its rivals.
Alright guys, so now we are at the powertrain section. So we'll go ahead and talk a little bit about what powers this car. So it is the same as last year. It's going to be a 1.5 liter turbo 4-cylinder as your base engine. That's going to produce 192 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. There is also a bigger 2-liter turbo engine that's available now. That produces 252 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque, and that's available as an option on the Sport trim, the EXL, and the Touring comes standard with it. There is also a hybrid model, but we'll be covering that separately. Alright, now as far as your transmissions, there's going to be 3 of them. So on this 1.5 turbo, most of the models come with a continuously variable transmission, which is what we have. With the 2-liter model, you have a 10-speed automatic transmission that's Honda developed. And then you have a 6-speed manual offered on the Sport trims for both engines. So you can have a 1.5 with a manual or the 2-liter with the manual. Now, of course, as you've probably discerned so far, there's a lot of different versions, so there's a lot of different fuel economies. I'm not going to read them all off to you. I'll just put them on the screen. But as far as this version here, which is the most common configuration, it's going to be rated at 29 city, 35 highway, 31 combined. Alright, but that pretty much does it for the specs. Let's go ahead and take it out the road and see how it performs. So that was our first acceleration in this 1.5 liter Accord. Power is basically, as I remember, pretty good for a base engine. You're looking at 192, which is, while it is technically less than the Camry, it is also above most of the competition. They tend to be 175, 180, so you're still a little bit ahead. And then there's also kind of the way they've tuned it. It does feel strong off the line. It really, power kind of just surges forward with the way that it works with the CVT. So it feels like more powerful than the numbers would suggest.
You know, and another thing about this engine is just how smooth and refined it is. I've always been a big fan of this 1.5 liter turbo because it really has a next level refinement to it. You know, we were just in the Camry 4-cylinder like 3 days ago, so we remember distinctly, and compared to that vehicle, the level of refinement is going to be way more, because that 4-cylinder engine is kind of loud, a little bit unrefined, and then this engine is top-notch refinement. And just kind of cruising along here, I am noticing that refinement in terms of the ride quality as well. This is one of those cars that it definitely feels kind of a bit of a class above in terms of its ride quality. When you hit a bump, you don't feel it. And this is the sport model, so that's even worth noting. This has really big wheels and stuff, so I'm sure you get even more comfortable on stuff like the EX trim. But it really is a very comfortable car, and you can tell that Honda has put an emphasis on making it comfortable for you and your family, which is what this mid-size crop of sedans really needs to accomplish.
That being said, the thing that always strikes me when I drive the Accord, this new generation of the Accord, is just how agile and well balanced it is. Because Mason said, like he said, it needs to be comfortable, family oriented, that stuff, but Honda kind of goes the extra mile with this ride and handling dynamic, because it doesn't need to be like that. People don't necessarily expect that in this class, and they have done a fantastic job. The steering has a lot more heft than what is typical in this class, and it is very fast reacting. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but as soon as you turn, instant response. You really have a good sense of where everything is, the wheels are placed, and where everything is going. And this chassis is just fantastic. Really buttoned down. It just does not really even feel like a midsize sedan. Like the way the body shifts around as you go around corners, it just stays completely flat and planted. You don't have like the body roll that is pretty common.
That's what I was going to say. It seems to ride a lot like the Civic, which is definitely a compliment because we really liked how that car drove. And this is even bigger than the Civic, so it really does have that button-down feel.
And you sit down quite low in this vehicle. You just really kind of like just a sporty driving dynamic. I would definitely put this with the Mazda 6 for the sportiest offerings in the class. Now we do also have a sport mode that we can try out, and we have some simulation with the paddles that we can do. Not bad. That's a pretty good simulation.
There are cars that definitely do worse.
It's actually kind of lets you rev it out a little bit. You know, of course, you're not really doing anything, but it's one of the best that I've felt. It's right up there with like the new Nissan Altima I think of, with having kind of realistic feel. That car actually has like a little bit of kick. You're not going to notice that on this, but as far as actually responding, it doesn't ignore you or anything.
I think they do a good job. Definitely the average person is not going to really notice. And that's really kind of a good thing about the CVT is riding along from the passenger seat, I feel like if I was oblivious to cars or whatever, that I would really have no idea that this is a CVT. I'd probably just think that it's a nice smooth transmission. And that's what
Right.
you want.
Right. The traditional complaints that people have about CVT is not present here at all. There's no droning or anything like that. It really responds well. This Honda has consistently made probably one of the best CVTs that I've ever driven, because like you said, it just blends into the background in such a way that you don't even really think about it, even if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily like CVTs like myself. It still doesn't bother me, and that's a really good compliment. So it's kind of an overused thing to say, but overall, this really is a fantastic package. You know, like we've discussed, it really has like a lot of sporty characteristics that are uncommon in this class, yet still is very comfortable, more spacious than a lot of the competition. You know, Honda, they've really put together a killer package, because it very much is in front of the great majority of the competition. And between it and the Camry, you can definitely see why they both dominate the class.
Now for the pricing for this 2020 Accord, for the base LX, that's going to start at $23,870. The Sport, $26,530. EX, $27,770. EXL, $30,270. Sport is the Sport 2.0T is $31,060. The EXL 2.0T is $32,270, and then finally you have the Touring, which has the standard 2-liter engine, for $36,100. Prices do rise between $100 and $400 depending on the trim, and the destination charge does rise $40 for 2020 as well. Now, of course, you know that Honda doesn't do any options, so we just have the 1.5T Sport, $26,530 plus the $930 destination charge, comes in at $27,460, which is honestly such a great value. I've always been a fan of this 1.5 liter Sport model in the Accord, because it really gives you such a nice interior, great exterior design, all for $27,000, which is a really, really good value. Well guys, we've enjoyed watching the first in-depth look at the 2020 Honda Accord Sport. Please hit those like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already, and we'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.